28 years of marriage. And the only skill Marla Henson ever truly perfected was smiling at me like I was simple. That was her first mistake. She looked at a man in work boots, a faded Carhartt jacket, and a 10-year-old Ford with rust above the wheel wells. And she saw a slow country fool she could humiliate in front of a judge. She thought she could walk into the Lynn County courthouse with her sisters, her friends, and her little courtroom audience, then leave with my company, my building, and the name I had spent half my life earning. She was wrong, but I am starting at the end. And the end only matters if you understand how quiet the beginning was. And God help me. In the beginning, I really did love her. Welcome back to Dad's Sliant Justice. Before this story unfolds, drop a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is there. And if stories about patient men, family betrayal, and cold consequences keep you listening, subscribe to the channel. It costs you nothing, but it helps us more than you know. I met Marla Shaw on a Friday night in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, at a church fish fry where the coffee was terrible and the pie was homemade. I was 26, already working 12-hour days for a plumbing contractor. She was 23, wearing a yellow sweater, passing out plates, laughing like every room had been built just to hear her. I remember standing there with a paper cup in my hand, thinking, there she is. That is the woman I am going to build a life with. I was right about the building part. I was wrong about the woman. We married 10 months later. We rented the upstairs half of an old duplex off C Avenue, where the radiators clanked all winter, and the kitchen floor sloped so badly, an egg would roll toward the back door if you set it down wrong. I was a licensed plumber by then, saving for my master license and taking every side job I could find. Marla worked reception at a pediatric clinic. We were not wealthy. Some months we were not even close to comfortable. But I had a plan. And I have always been a dangerous man when I have a plan. By 32, I had started Henson Waterworks with one used excavator, 2 employees, and a borrowed office inside a friend's storage building. We repaired sewer lines, installed drainage systems, and took the miserable jobs bigger contractors did not want. By 36, we had city contracts. By 42, we were bidding small county infrastructure projects across eastern Iowa. By 48, Henson Waterworks was clearing nearly $2 million a year before taxes. Not flashy money, but solid money, the kind of money that comes from mud, permits, frozen hands, and being the man who answers the phone when a lift station fails at 20 inches the morning. Marla stopped working after our son Ethan was born. That was her choice, and I supported it. I wanted her home if that was what made her happy. I wanted Ethan to have a mother who was present. What I did not understand then was that Marla did not want peace. She wanted a stage. Once the money got better, she built herself a life that looked good from the sidewalk and rotten from the foundation. There were lunches at the Class Act, spa days in Iowa City, charity boards where she posed for pictures but never stayed to clean up, and a circle of women who spoke in soft voices until someone left the room. Her closest friend was Cheryl Voss, a real estate agent with diamond bracelets, sharp perfume, and the kind of laugh that always sounded like it had a victim. Cheryl had 2 daughters, 3 divorces, and endless advice about what a woman deserved. Marla listened to her the way some people listen to preachers. I was the husband who paid the bills, fixed the sump pump, and showed up to fundraisers in a clean shirt when instructed. I thought that was marriage maturing into routine. I now know it was me being placed in the background of my own life. The first crack came 5 years before the divorce. I had driven back early from a drainage inspection near Mount Vernon because a storm system we were worried about shifted south. I pulled into the driveway at 3:30 inches the afternoon and saw Marla on the back deck with her phone pressed to her ear. The sliding door was cracked open. She did not hear my truck because the old Ford always rattled until it didn't. And that afternoon it didn't. I heard her say, clear as a bell, he thinks the company makes him untouchable. Wait until I take half and make him pay me to live. There are sentences that do not break your heart. They harden it. That one did. I stood in my own kitchen, holding my keys, listening to my wife describe me like I was a bank with bad hearing. Cheryl must have said something on the other end, because Marla laughed. Not the church fish fry laugh. Not the laugh I had fallen for. This one was small, mean, and satisfied. He'll never see it coming, she said. I stepped backward quietly, went out through the garage, got back into my truck, and drove around for 40 minutes. I did not yell. I did not confront her. I did not ask who she was becoming, because that question already had an answer. I drove past the river, past the Quaker Oats plant, past buildings I had worked in, and roads my crews had dug under. And I felt something settle inside me. Not anger exactly. Anger burns too hot and too fast. What I felt was colder. It was the feeling I get when a trench wall starts to shift, and everyone needs to stop talking and start moving with discipline. 2 weeks later, Marla told me she was going to Chicago for a weekend with her sister Tessa. She packed 3 dresses, 2 pairs of heels, and no sensible coat, which told me plenty before she even zipped the suitcase. I drove her to the eastern Iowa airport myself. I kissed her cheek. I told her to have fun. That night I called Tessa and asked if the traffic had been bad getting into Chicago. There was a pause just long enough to raise a flag. Then Tessa said, "Oh, you know, it was fine. Marla is tired. Tessa is not a cruel person, but she lies like a child hiding a broken lamp." I thanked her and hung up. I never did find out for certain where Marla went that weekend. Maybe it was Chicago. Maybe it was not. Maybe there was a man. Maybe there was only Cheryl and a hotel room full of bad advice. The destination mattered less than the fact that she expected me to believe whatever she handed me. That night I sat in the kitchen she had remodeled with quartz counters and a farmhouse sink she never washed a dish in. And I made a decision. If Marla wanted a courtroom, she was going to get one. But I would not arrive unprepared. The next morning I called my younger sister, Nora. Nora is a family law attorney in Des Moines. And if you ever want proof that God has a sense of humor, put one quiet contractor and one ruthless attorney at the same Thanksgiving table for 40 years. She answered on the second ring. "Please tell me you finally want to update your will," she said. "I need to review everything." I told her, everything meaning what? The company, the land, the old agreements, my marriage. There was silence. Then Nora said, "Come tomorrow. Bring every document you have. And do not tell Marla." Over the next 3 years, I did exactly what patient men do. I documented. I organized. I repaired weak spots before anyone could call them cracks. Nothing I did was hidden. Nothing was fraudulent. Every transfer was valued properly. Every filing went through the accountant. Every agreement had signatures, dates, and a paper trail clean enough to eat off. Henson Waterworks had started before my marriage. But over the years I had let personal and business assets grow tangled together because life gets busy and trust makes people careless. Nora helped me untangle them. We formalized old equipment leases. We updated partnership documents with my operations manager, Dale Mercier, who had earned equity the honest way by showing up before sunrise for 19 straight years. We separated the commercial yard from the marital checking account that had stupidly paid part of its taxes once. 12 years earlier, when my bookkeeper was sick and I was distracted, we confirmed what belonged to the company, what belonged to me before the marriage, and what was genuinely marital. It was boring work. Boring work wins lawsuits. Nora asked me once, about a year in, "Are you doing this because you want to divorce her?" I said. "No." She looked over her glasses. Then why I told her the truth. Because if she ever decides to divorce me, I want the truth to be easier to prove than her story. Nora leaned back, tapped a pen against the folder, and said, "That is the saddest intelligent sentence I have heard all week." Then she went back to work. The divorce papers arrived on a Monday in October. Marla placed them on the breakfast table beside my coffee like she was serving toast. She was wearing a cream sweater and the calm expression of a woman who had rehearsed this moment in a mirror. She said she wanted to handle things with dignity. Then I read the petition. She wanted the house, half the company, long-term spousal support, half the commercial yard, half my retirement account, and a temporary order preventing me from making any business decisions without written consent. Dignity. apparently, had a shopping list. I looked up at her. Is this what Cheryl told you to ask for? Her face changed for half a second. Only half. This is what I deserve, she said. I nodded once. Then I guess we will let the court decide. She smiled then. It was almost tender. Ray, you have no idea how this works. That was her second mistake. Men like me may not talk about what we know. That does not mean we know nothing. By the time the first hearing came around, Marla had turned the divorce into a public event. Her mother came. Tesakame. Cheryl came. Of course, wearing a white blazer, like she was the keynote speaker at a conference called Taking Him for Everything. Two women from Marla's charity board came. One of Cheryl's daughters came for reasons still unclear to me. There were 9 people on her side of the gallery, all whispering, all looking at me like I was already a story they would laugh about over lunch. On my side sat Nora. That was it. My son Ethan wanted to come, but I told him no. He was 27, teaching high school math in Ames, and he had enough burdens without watching his parents turn pain into theater. Nora wore a charcoal suit and carried a leather folder, so plain it looked harmless. I knew better. That folder had taken 3 years to fill. Marla sat at her table with her attorney, a polished man named Grant Bell who had silver hair, perfect cuffs, and the faint smile of someone billing by the quarter hour. He opened with a speech about Marla's sacrifices, her contributions to the household, and her right to maintain the standard of living established during the marriage. Marla nodded at all the correct places. Cheryl nodded too, harder than necessary. The judge, a calm woman named Judge Elaine Porter, listened without expression. Then Nora stood. She did not perform. Nora has never needed to. Your Honor, she said, Mr. Henson is prepared to provide complete financial transparency. We believe the controlling agreements, the company records, and the timeline of ownership will clarify which assets are marital and which are not. Grant Bell smiled like she had just said something adorable. We welcome transparency, he said. Nora smiled back. Excellent. For the next half hour, it looked ordinary. Marla's side presented a valuation of Henson Waterworks that made my eyebrows rise despite myself. Their expert claimed the company was worth $7 million, which was the sort of number you get when you count every future contract as guaranteed and every piece of old equipment as if it came wrapped in gold. They included the commercial yard, the office building, projected profits from bids we had not won, and a goodwill figure that seemed to assume my name could be sold separately from my body. Then Grant introduced a document I had never seen before. He called it a postnuptial memorandum. According to this paper, signed supposedly by me and Marla 8 years earlier, I had agreed that Henson Waterworks would be treated as a fully marital asset regardless of its original formation. It was neat. It was typed. It carried what looked like my signature at the bottom. Marla lowered her eyes when it was mentioned, the way guilty people do when they mistake silence for innocence. Nora asked for a copy. Grant handed it over with the satisfied air of a man sliding a winning card across a poker table. Nora read the first page, then the second, then she looked at me. Just briefly, not with surprise, but with confirmation. I had known my sister my entire life. That look meant the trap had closed, and the animal inside had only just heard the door. Your Honor, Nora said, we request permission to address Exhibit 32 before the court relies on it for any temporary orders. Grant frowned. This is a valid agreement between the parties. Nora did not look at him. Then you should have no objection to a few questions about its origin. Judge Porter adjusted her glasses. Proceed. Nora walked to the bench with a thin packet of documents. Not thick. Not dramatic. Thin. That is how you know the important evidence is inside. Exhibit 32 is dated June 14. 2017, she said. It identifies Henson Waterworks LLC at the top of page 1 and refers to the company operating under its current limited liability structure. Grant nodded impatiently. Correct. Nora turned one page. The problem, Your Honor, is that Henson Waterworks did not become an LLC until February 2018. In June 2017, it was still registered as Henson Waterworks Plumbing and Drainage, a sole proprietorship. The room went quiet in the special way. Rooms go quiet when every person understands a sentence before they understand its consequences. Nora continued. The document also references a company tax identification number assigned in March 2018, 9 months after the stated date of signing. It uses the address of our current office on 16th Avenue SW, which Mr. Henson did not lease until November 2019, and the notary stamp belongs to a notary whose commission did not begin until 2020. Grant Bell stopped smiling. That was the first honest thing he had done all morning. Marla turned toward him and whispered sharply. He whispered back. Cheryl leaned forward with her mouth slightly open. No longer looking like a keynote speaker, Tessa stared at the floor. Marla's mother pressed her hand against her chest, as if the room had lost oxygen. Judge Porter looked down at the document for a long moment. Then she looked at Grant. Counsel, were you aware of these discrepancies? Grant cleared his throat. Your Honor, my client provided the document as part of her records. The judge's voice stayed level. That does not answer my question. He swallowed. No. Your Honor, I was not aware. Nora placed one more page on the bench. We have also submitted a preliminary report from a forensic document examiner. The signature attributed to Mr. Henson shows characteristics consistent with a scanned reproduction. Not a wet ink original. Now, I looked at Marla. I had not meant to, but I did. Her face had gone pale under the makeup. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the paper, as if betrayal should have worked better if printed on heavier stock. Grant stood quickly. Your Honor, we request a recess to confer. Judge Porter looked at him for 3 full seconds. You may confer with your client after I finish speaking. That is a sentence no attorney wants to hear. The judge continued. The court will not rely on Exhibit 32 for any temporary or final determination until its authenticity is resolved. Given the nature of the inconsistencies, I am referring the matter to the appropriate authorities for review. For today's purposes, the court will proceed based on the documented ownership history and the enforceable premarital agreement already filed. Someone behind Marla made a small sound. I think it was Cheryl, but I never turned around to check. Let me explain the premarital agreement. Because people hear that phrase and imagine cruelty. It was not cruel. It was clear. I had started the business before I married Marla. She knew that. I had equipment debt, small contracts, and 1 employee before we ever shared a mailbox. The agreement said that premarital business assets and their direct replacement stayed separate, while marital savings, the house, vehicles, and jointly accumulated accounts would be divided fairly. It also included limited support for a defined period if the marriage ended after a long duration. Marla signed it with her own attorney present. I paid for that attorney. She joked about it afterward and said, "You are such a planner." She was right. The hearing did not end the way her audience expected. There was no order handing her my company. No frozen business decisions. No half of contracts she had never bid. Jobs she had never walked, payrolls she had never met, or machines she could not identify if her life depended on it. The judge ordered temporary support at a reasonable level, kept the business operating under my control, and scheduled further proceedings. Grant asked for another recess. This time the judge allowed it. Marla stood too fast and nearly knocked over her chair. When they came back, everything about her had changed. That morning, she had entered like a woman arriving at a coronation. By noon, she looked like a woman who had realized the crown was evidence. Cheryl was no longer whispering. Marla's mother was no longer glaring at me. Tessa looked sick. The gallery that had come to watch me lose had become very interested in the floor. Nora sat beside me, hands folded. Breathe, she murmured. I am breathing, I said. No, you are counting. She was right. I was counting dates. June 2017, February 2018, March 2018, November 2019. 2020. Dates matter. People who lie hate dates because dates do not care how charming you are. The final settlement took 4 months. Grant Bell withdrew from the case 3 weeks after the hearing. His motion was professional and careful, but I have read enough paperwork to know when a man is backing away from a fire. Marla hired a younger attorney from a smaller firm. And after that, the tone changed. The demands got quieter. The fantasy numbers disappeared. The word company stopped appearing in bold. Marla received half the marital investment account, half the joint savings, her vehicle, and a payout for her share of the equity in the house after it sold. She did not keep the house because she could not refinance it on the temporary support figure and no current income. That was not my punishment. That was arithmetic. She received 18 months of support under the agreement. Enough to get settled. Not enough to keep pretending she was married to my payroll. She did not receive Henson Waterworks. She did not receive the commercial yard. She did not receive the office building. She did not receive the right to stand inside a life she had mocked and call it hers. As for Exhibit 32, I will say this carefully. I am not a prosecutor. I do not control investigations. But I know what was referred. I know the notary denied notarizing that document. I know the address, company structure, and tax number made the stated date impossible. I know the signature looked like it had been lifted from an old insurance form and pasted into a new lie. Someone created that document. Someone delivered it to an attorney. Someone expected it to survive a courtroom. That someone was not me. Ethan came down from Ames the weekend after the settlement became final. He helped me move from the house into a smaller brick ranch on the southeast side of town. Not far from Bever Park, it had 3 bedrooms, an unfinished basement, and a back porch that needed sanding. It was not impressive. That was the point. I had spent too many years living inside rooms decorated to impress people who did not love me. We carried boxes until our backs hurt. Then we sat on folding chairs in the garage, drinking gas station coffee because I had not unpacked the mugs. Ethan stared at the concrete floor for a long time. Finally, he said, "Dad, did you know she was going to do it?" I looked at him. He was a grown man. But in that moment, I saw the boy who used to wait by the front window for my truck. I knew she wanted more than truth would give her. I said, "That is not the same as knowing everything." He nodded. "Were you trying to hurt her?" That question deserved honesty. "No," I said. "I was trying to make sure she could not destroy me." He took that in. Then he said something I will remember longer than I remember the courtroom. "I am glad you did not make me choose sides." I had to look away for a second. "You are my son," I said, "not a witness." He nodded again. That was all. Some conversations do not need more words. 3 months later, Marla called my office. It was a Thursday morning, raining hard. The kind of rain that makes every contractor in Iowa check a weather radar before finishing his coffee. My assistant said, "Rye, there is a woman on line 2. She says it is personal." I almost told her to take a message. Instead, I picked up, "This is Ray." There was a long pause. Then Marla said, "I just wanted to hear your voice." No audience. No courtroom. No, Cheryl. Just a tired voice on a phone line. I said, "You should not be calling me." She breathed in shakily. "I made mistakes." "You did." I was angry. "That is something to tell your attorney." Another pause. "Did you ever love me?" That one almost got through. Almost. I looked at the framed photo on my desk of Ethan at his college graduation, standing between me and Marla. All 3 of us smiling inside a life that had already started cracking. "I loved who I thought you were," I said. "That is not the same thing." She was quiet. Then she whispered, "I do not know what I am supposed to do now." I kept my voice even. "Start with the truth. It will feel unfamiliar, but it is easier to maintain." Then I hung up. I sat there for a moment, listening to the rain hit the office window. Outside, one of our crews was loading pipe onto a flatbed. Dale was arguing with a supplier on speakerphone. The world had not stopped. My company was still running. My name was still on the door. My hands were still mine. My life, damaged but standing, was still mine. People ask whether revenge felt good. That is the wrong question. Revenge is hot. What I felt was cold relief. The relief of a man who checked every bolt before the bridge opened. The relief of knowing the truth was documented, signed, dated, copied, and ready when the lie arrived, wearing perfume and a cream sweater. He do not hate Marla. Hate is a room you have to live in with the person who hurt you. I moved out of that room. I locked the door behind me. Then I went back to work. Here is what 28 years taught me. Quiet men are not empty men. We are not weak because we do not shout. We are not fooled because we do not interrupt. Some of us are listening. Some of us are saving receipts. Some of us are giving you every chance to become honest before the facts do it for you. Marla brought 9 people to court to watch me lose. I brought 1 sister, 1 folder, and 1 impossible date. Her attorneys stopped smiling before lunch. If this story kept you listening, hit like, subscribe to Dad's Slant Justice, and comment where you are watching from. Sometimes subscribing feels like nothing to you, but it helps this channel keep telling stories like this.